Okay, we'll try this again. My phone died. So, just recap a little bit. I wanted to come on here because I woke up this morning at 5 a.m. and I saw this post that one of my friends made, and it was just this photo session of these women who were all had these invisible illnesses and how they were surviving it, and it was so empowering to me. And the quote that they wrote on there literally brought me to tears this morning because it's so powerful. It says, "Your story is the key that can unlock someone else's prison. Share your testimony." And that was so powerful to me because throughout this, almost 2 years now that I have had these quirky symptoms, I had always felt like I was alone. And I didn't know if there was anybody else in the world out there who was getting better or how they were living, because when I first started having symptoms, I ignored them. And then when shit hit the fan and I finally was diagnosed, I was very, 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 very depressed. I felt like I was alone. I didn't know if I would ever get better. And when I saw that this morning, your story is the key that can unlock someone else's prison. Share your testimony. I was just like, this is not something that I've ever really talked about, because, the only people that have ever really even seen the real, pits of when things sucked was, Steve, his mom, and my friend Heather. Everyone else, I just kind of kept at arm's length because I didn't want to burden anybody with it. There was a lot of times where I didn't feel good enough to go do things. And I didn't want to lose friends per se because I didn't feel good enough to go do things. And so my story started in 2016 when I was really stressed out. Obviously, growing up, I always had anxiety, and so I knew what anxiety felt like, and, of course, you would sometimes get heart palpitations with anxiety, and so in 2016, it was the most stressful time of my life, and so I was experiencing heart palpitations, and I used to associate these heart palpitations that I was getting with anxiety or with drinking coffee or whatever it might be, and that's what I always had associated the heart palpitations with. Until I was going to go to Mexico for my birthday in 2016, I got on the highway and my heart rate, I could feel it speeding away, and I thought I was going to pass out at the wheel, and I was like, oh shit, this isn't good. And so that it kind of went away. I went to Mexico, things were fine. And then halfway through Mexico, I was walking on the beach and I was out of breath and I had to go sit down. I could feel my heart pounding on my chest. And the next morning we went to breakfast, and I almost passed out at the table. And I was like, Steve, we got to go back to the room. And I had to hold on to him, and I thought there was no way I was going to get back there. So when I got back to Ohio, I went in to my primary care doctor, and I was like, something's not right. I don't really know what's wrong. And they put a heart monitor on me. And while it was a normal heart rhythm, the only thing they could find is that at one point my heart rate went up to 143 in the middle of the night. And I was like, well, I'm not exercising. In fact, I didn't exercise at all during my heart monitor. So my heart rate was going up to 140 in the middle of the night. But they blew it off, said nothing about it, so I went on about my day. And it wasn't until I went on a cruise in November, and I got sick after, and that's when things really got hairy for me. I started having vertigo all the time. I couldn't drive because I was so dizzy. I thought I was going to pass out. It felt it just felt like anxiety attacks were happening. I didn't really understand until in January I woke up in the middle of the night and I could feel my heart racing, and I took my blood pressure. My blood pressure was low and my heart rate was 130, and by the time I got to the emergency room, my heart rate was 160. And so it was so scary for me because I had no idea what was happening, and all these doctors were throwing these terms around SVT or inappropriate sinus tachycardia. They're just throwing around these like crazy terms that I didn't know, and like I was scared. And so I was just like, what the fuck? Like, what the fuck am I gonna do here? And so I was terrified. I just was truly just terrified for a long time. And after I was initially in the hospital, I, had some tests done, and they finally diagnosed me with POTS. Didn't tell me anything about it. They just said, wear some compression stockings, go about your day. And literally I was just sitting home, and they just told me to come back if I wanted medication, because they said I didn't want any medication. And so really I was just kind of left to my own devices of like, how do I figure this out? Like, what do I do? Because at that point, it didn't really feel like it was like all that terrible. But I mean, I was scared. I just didn't really understand it. Didn't understand the mechanisms of what was happening in my body, why it was happening. And it wasn't until I saw my cardiologist, nurse practitioner, and I asked her, I said, why don't we just figure out what's causing it and then we can fix it? And she laughed in my face and said, that's never going to happen. That's never going to happen. And I just thought, what a bitch. What a bitch. And I was like, no, in fact, I'm going to find out what's going to happen. And that was kind of what set me off to be like, I'm going to do whatever the fuck I'm going to have to do to figure this out and fix it. Not knowing then that stress was really, really the root cause of why my autonomic nervous system went nuts, why I started having all these like crazy symptoms. So I got myself into a cardiac rehab program, and I started this protocol that went through a clinical trial, and it had good results, but me being the person that I am, I tried to go way too fast, and that's when things got really scary for me, is I was stressing my nervous system out even more. And so one day when I was at cardiac rehab, I noticed when I was cooling down that my heart rate wasn't coming down. And I was just kept trying to cool down. And then all of a sudden my heart rate went up to 190. And I was just laying there on the floor of cardiac rehab like, oh my God, what is happening to my body? And I ended up being able to go home. They didn't send me to the hospital because, again, a normal heart rhythm. And they said, people with POTS, this happens. And I remember I got home and I was just like laying there in bed because I was just so exhausted. And all of a sudden my heart rate started speeding away. And I remember being so scared because I called 911 because I was like, my heart rate, it kept doing it. It would speed up and then it would slow down. It would speed up and it would slow down. And I was just terrified. And so that incident really was not cool, really scary. The paramedics came and I went to the hospital. I was there and they got to witness for the next like 6 hours of just like once an hour, my heart rate would go up to like 180. And they just were like, we don't know what's wrong with you. And they sent me home. Luckily, 5 days later, I went to a doctor, a new neurologist, to say like, what is wrong with me? Why is my body doing these crazy things? And luckily at that point, like by the time I got there, I was in really rough shape. I couldn't get out of bed because anytime I would get out of bed, I thought I was going to pass out. My heart rate it was just insane. I would sit up and my heart rate was like 140, and I was terrified to take a shower because I thought I was going to pass out in the shower. So Steve's mom, God love Carolyn, would help me shower. So I didn't pass out in the shower because my heart rate was just all over the place. My blood pressure was all over the place. But luckily, again, when I got to this new doctor, my heart rate was like resting 120. My blood pressure was like 150 or like 95. My blood pressure was really high. So I don't know. I was in the hospital then for like a week. I had all these like crazy tests done. They tested me for like diabetes insipidus. So I like had to do this like starvation, water deprivation test. I had an EP study where they went into my heart to make sure that I didn't have an actual heart problem. So I went through all these crazy things, and at the end of it, they just gave me medicine and sent me home and just said, we don't have any resources for you. Like, we don't have anything we can do for you. And so that's when I just realized, like, I have to figure this out myself. Like, I have to figure this out. And so after I got out of the hospital, I like spent the next, month literally in bed because I felt so defeated. I felt like crap. My heart rate and my blood pressure just were terrible. And I just wondered, like, is this the way life is going to be, like, forever? Like, is this how my life is going to be? And I remember very seriously thinking, like, if this is the way my life is going to be forever, like, I don't want to live like this. And it was a really, really, like, dark time for me. That was a really, really tough time for me. Just not knowing what was going to happen to me, and all the doctors just didn't have anything for me. They just said, we can try some different medications. And I was just like, why is this happening to me? Like, my philosophy is if I was okay before, why can't I be okay again? And there wasn't any doctors that were willing to help answer those questions for me. So I ended up going to the Cleveland Clinic and seeing some different specialists there. And again, the only thing after a bajillion series of other invasive tests that I had done, the only thing they could offer me were some medications that had horrible side effects that made me even dizzier than I was. One medication was to slow my heart rate down, which dropped my blood pressure. So then they had to add a medication that would help increase my blood pressure, and it was just not okay. And so really what I had to do is there just came a day after I got out of the hospital where I was like, if I don't want to live this way for the rest of my life, I have to do something about it. And so I was like, I've known from personal development in the past that I have to I had to figure this out, and I knew the way to do that was to start working on my mindset. I had to get myself out of this funk, of this depression that I was in, and start believing that I could get better, because the resources were out there to get better. Like, I had read a few stories about people being able to reverse POTS and, reverse their illnesses, and I was like, I owe it to myself to try to figure these things out. And so really over the last year, I got myself, first and foremost, I got myself into therapy, and I started seeing a therapist once a week, every single week, and I'm still there. Not once a week, once every other week, but I'm still there because I have a lot of progress to do, because I realized that not only was I really very depressed from being sick, and literally was just bedbound. I couldn't get out of bed unless I thought I was going to pass out. I was unemployed. I pushed all my friends away because I didn't feel good enough to drive places. I didn't feel good enough to go out and do things. I was just like, if I want to regain these relationships, like, I have to do something about it. If I want to regain my health, I have to do something about it. And I just had to truly believe that I could get better. And so after I got into therapy, I just started diving into research as much as I possibly could about, because they think that what I have is autoimmune related. So I just started doing so much research on, what do people do that have autoimmune diseases? How do they get better? And so I just kept pointing to nutrition, the foods that you're eating. And so I just ripped my diet completely apart, because I just knew, I had to fix this. And if other people were getting better, and all the science is there, is that, you're either, nurturing your body or you're fucking it up, period. If you're eating shit and not exercising, you're going to be sick. And I was not eating great, and I was not exercising. And I don't mean exercising like hitting the gym. I literally just was not moving my body, which is not good. So I just ripped my diet apart. I just made myself get up. I remember very clearly this 80-year-old woman in the apartment community that we lived in. Every single morning, without waiver, she would get up and she would go walking. And I walked out and I told her how much she inspired me, that it helped me get out of bed. And I was like, I'm just going to start with walking just a little bit. So I started walking with my 80-year-old neighbor. She would say, we can go as far as you want. And she would always check on me. She had a little life alert button and said, if anything happens, I'll push my life alert button and it'll be okay. And so I said, all right. So I got up and I started walking with her. I changed my diet, and I wasn't quite seeing the results I wanted. So I decided I was going to go see a functional medicine doctor and see what happens. And so that's really what I've been doing up until now, is seeing a functional medicine doctor who's been digging into the root causes of disease that's happening in my body. And, we've uncovered a good amount of stuff. I had a lot of nutritional deficiencies. I had some bad bugs in my gut. I had an overgrowth of bacteria in my small intestine, which was preventing me from absorbing my nutrients. And so we really, discovered a lot. But most importantly, the one thing that I've learned over this last year of just overcoming what left me in bed, and now I'm active again. I'm off almost all of my medication. I'm back to work. I'm living such a happier and a healthier life. I've, found the resources where I'm prepping my own meals. I have the resources. If I start to have symptoms again, I have my toolbox where I know what does my care plan look like that I can use to help myself. I know the type of diet. I play around with foods. I play around with different types of exercises, with walking or yoga or whatever. And I just have learned how to follow my gut and listen to my body. If my body is saying, yes, this is a good idea, that's kind of how I follow it. When it comes to, or medication, supplements, food, exercise, life decisions, period. I just listen to my body. I just ask myself, is this the right treatment plan for me? Is this the right thing for me? There's all these diets out there that say, you should do this or that. That's a whole other life. But I had to customize a plan to me. And that's been most important. And I just hope that if there's one thing, if you guys make it to the end of this, that you take away from this is, there are so many different treatment plans and treatment options out there. There isn't any one size fits all. And if you're not being offered the full picture of how you can get better, I just encourage you to never stop looking for those answers, because although I know in the pits of feeling like things will never get better, they will. I led a very unhealthy lifestyle before this. I was always anxious. I was drinking. I wasn't going anywhere productive in my life. And as a result of getting sick and being unemployed and stuff, it's just really transformed my life, my relationships, and I've just started listening to myself. So I hope in some small way that this helps someone along the way. And yeah, I felt very empowered to want to just share my story, because it wasn't always pretty. It was a very dark time for me at one point, and but I got through it. I'm still getting through it. Am I cured? No, but I'm not where I was, and that's what I'm most happy about. So when I read your story is the key that can unlock someone else's prison, share your testimony, I just thought I owe it to myself to do that. So no, this was a long one, but happy Friday, guys. And I just wish every single person health, vitality, energy, because everyone's worthy of it. And if you don't have it, I encourage you to go looking for the right solution for you. So have a great weekend.